Here we go. Tackle a serious topic that I'm sure people are going to have opinions about.
Oh,
It's kind
yeah.
of nice having this mic.
You just take it away.
It almost looks like a feather duster,
Yeah.
though. It's, you know.
Okay. We will kick things off. All right, episode 3 of the Good Vibes Only podcast. We're back again. We have another special guest this episode. We have my friend and old coworker, Matt Ingram.
Hello, hello.
Woo! Anyone who watches us who's from Hamilton might recognize him because he's been anchoring the 6 o'clock news on CHCH for the last year or so. So
Local Hamilton celeb.
yes, correct.
I try.
I'm just bringing them all into Steph's house. So we have him here because obviously he's one of the best people to talk about this stuff because he's been covering it for the last month, specifically in the last week since the election actually happened. And that's what the topic of our episode is today. We're talking about the U.S. election. Very divisive election, but we're going to get into all that in the episode. And our cocktail for the episode is called the Red, White, and Blue Sparkler because got to do U.S. themed.
It didn't work out well.
It was supposed to be a layered cocktail that was red, white, and blue, but it's mostly just green and blue. The ingredients are cranberry juice, lemonade, and blue curacao, but we're making it work.
Well, it
so
looks good. Cheers.
Cheers. Let's try this thing.
You know, it's not bad.
That's
Kind of sweet.
Yeah, it's sweet.
Can't
It's
really
sweet.
taste the liquor.
It's blue curacao. It's only like
Yeah.
50%, right? When I was getting it, I was like, "There's not really much alcohol in this cocktail."
Yeah, it is
It's
sweet.
Wendy's lemonade.
It's not
so
bad. It's a good choice.
I went to Wendy's. I got us lemonade.
Shout out.
Shout out to Wendy's.
Honestly, yeah.
Wendy's,
shout
they're
out.
looking for a sponsor. Get
Shout
in
out
touch.
Cheesy
Yeah,
Cheddar.
if you need me, I've had 2 Dave singles this week, so hook me up. Anyways, I have notes because there's so much, but basically, yeah, the winner,
The winner.
The winner.
Donald Trump.
President Trump.
Thoughts?
Okay, were we expecting it? I kind of wasn't. I thought it would be close, but I kind of thought
I thought it
Kamala
would be.
would pull it off.
Yeah, I thought it would be closer. I'm not shocked, but I'm a little bit surprised because I mean I thought we were past the whole Trump thing, given how he ended his last term and everyone being so anti-Trump. So I was kind of like, well, maybe not. Maybe not.
I'm surprised by how clear the victory was. You know, because all the polling said it was going to be close. We all expected a close race. The news line in the days leading up to Election Day was, how long are we going to have to wait for a result? 'Cause
right?
In the last election, it was Saturday before we knew clearly who had won,
Definitively, yeah.
that
Right.
Biden had beat him. So I was surprised, but not surprised at the same time. And what I mean by that is when it was Biden and him and the infamous debate,
yeah.
it seemed very clear that Trump had an advantage. Then they bring in Kamala. And the problem with Kamala, and again, this is from me listening to what American reporters
Yeah.
are saying. I didn't get a chance to talk
Right.
to Americans. I talked to American reporters, is that people didn't know a lot about her. And I mean, if you watch the Biden administration, she was in the back seat. She was not in the front
Yeah.
foreground a lot. So I think people didn't get a chance to know her very well.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like looking through, like we get at news organizations, you get access to like wire services like Reuters and CNN, and like it was very rare that you saw her appearances on CNN and Reuters when she was VP. So even then, like she was VP, but you still didn't like see much about her, and really all that anybody ever talked about in that election with Biden was like her record as a prosecutor and how she was kind of hardline, and it seemed like an interesting choice for the Democrats given like her stance on crime and drugs and stuff like that.
Really though, like what even is her job as a VP? Like how much does a VP actually do over there? Like are they just kind of like a stand-in. Like, they're not doing
They
much
don't
to
do
my
much.
knowledge.
And it's at the what do you call it? They serve at the privilege of the president, or at the, what's the word I'm looking for? At the president's prerogative.
Yeah. So they have to like ask
Yeah.
to do stuff basically.
And they can say, hey, Biden, I really want to work on this file. Education's real passionate. I'm real passionate about transportation. I don't know. But it's up to the president to say, okay,
Sure.
fine. I'm going to make you my czar of drug policy. I'm going to make you my czar of immigration policy. She seemed to take a very much of a back seat. You fast forward then to Kamala Trump debate. And oh my God, she did incredible.
she blew him out of the water.
You know, I watched that debate actually with a relative who's a big Trump supporter. And the two of us watched it together. And even she had to admit, Kamala, wow, she did a heck of a job. She really came out. She knew her stuff. He looked like the same old Trump.
Yeah.
So at that moment, I thought, wow, she's got a chance. Like, this
Yeah,
really
me
could
too.
be the time. But, you know, whatever happened between that moment and election day, I think you are right in the sense that it caught a lot of people off guard. Not everyone was expecting this. Everyone was expecting it to be tight.
Yeah.
But man, Trump, like, he clearly won.
I know, but the thing is too, is like where it was kind of close was in, like, if you actually like looked at the individual states, like there weren't many states where he won more than like 50, 51, 52%. So like
Sure.
he won a lot of states, and that was like the clear, but when you looked at the breakdown, it was still like just like 50% to 49% or 51% to 40. Like it was close in that sense. But I think a lot of people, even if she lost, still was expecting her to win the popular vote, and she didn't even win that.
Really?
Yeah.
No, he had like something like 74 million. She's at 70 right now.
And he is the first Republican to win the popular vote since 2004.
Gross.
Jesus.
Yeah. So it's a historic election in so many ways. Like, not to mention the fact, like, Trump, he was a loser. He lost to Biden. And in American political history, you lose, you're done. The people don't want anything to do with you anymore.
Yeah.
The last time that somebody came back from the dead like Trump was Grover Cleveland in the 1890s.
Oh my God.
So
We're going back.
We're going back. We got dates. The very fact that he was able to come in and win is history in itself. Whatever you think of the man,
Yeah,
it's just so unusual in American history.
Yeah, you can't really deny that. I think from my perspective, where she kind of like floundered and the Democratic Party kind of floundered is it really seemed like they were, especially in this last month, like attacking Republican voters and trying to talk about policies that they would implement and things that they would do to attract more Republican voters to try and take some votes away from him. But I think what that ended up doing was ostracizing a large chunk of Democratic voters who, had she not taken a harder stance on immigration or a harder stance on what's going on in Gaza, she might have kept those Democratic voters. Like I think in their attempt to bring some people from the Republican base over to their side, they pushed away a lot of people who were already like in their base because that was kind of the thing. And I know I saw a lot of opinions on social media after the election kind of trying to scapegoat and blame more progressive Democrats for allowing this to happen. But it's, you know, as somebody who considers myself a little bit more progressive as well, like you kind of got to stand up for what you believe in. And if you feel that party member, like, I think that's the difference with Democrats and Republicans. Democrats aren't like, we're voting for our party leader or the highway. We can be like, nah, I'm not really a fan of what he or she is doing, so I don't know if I want to vote for them. Whereas like Republicans are like, you're the Republican nominee, that's our guy, that's our person.
Well, maybe you hit it on the head there, because I think if you rewind the clock back to before Kamala was endorsed by Biden, they never held a primary. They never said, okay, Democrats,
Who do you
Biden's
want?
going to step aside. Who do you want? They shoved her down their throats. And listen,
I feel like that was strategic in a way too.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I feel like they put her in at the last second. So I think they were trying to give her a leg up in the sense where that she wouldn't have to go through all of those steps for people to be like, well, no,
we still don't want to vote for her.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the logic was, but you do sometimes wonder, does it come down to, had Biden done what he suggested he was going to do when he beat Trump, in that he'd be a one-term president and he'd set up kind of the next generation of the Democratic Party, a new party, a younger, more multicultural party. He didn't do that. And okay, he stepped aside eventually. But I think the question that a lot of historians and a lot of analysts will debate for years and years and years and years is, what would have happened if Biden had stepped aside earlier and they'd had a primary? Would it have been Kamala? I don't know, maybe. But who knows? I mean, like, you think about Obama, who is such a force in the Democratic Party. He was a nobody in the beginning. So who's to say they didn't hold a primary and some star candidate emerged
That's true.
that America united around? So that's one of my big questions.
Yeah, or even just some of like the lingering candidates from the Biden-Trump election. There were quite a few Democrats who came out and like were polling very well, and Biden wasn't like a shoo-in when he got elected as the Democratic nominee. So I think maybe some of those people might have like rallied some more supporters. It's really hard to say, and I think she was at a slight disadvantage just because of how late Biden decided that he wasn't going to be the president anymore.
I mean, 100 days, like, that's insane.
He did a debate with Trump.
It's funny, here in Canada, it's like a 60-day election is like, oh my God, it's 60 days. You know, usually we get about a 30-day election cycle.
Yeah.
But in the States, it's like 2 years. So instead of she getting 2 years, she got 100 days.
Yeah.
Like, that had to affect her on
100%.
some level, right?
100%.
Like, how else?
For sure.
And it prevented, like I was kind of saying, it prevented her from being able to listen to the base as much as she could have, right? She might have made like some slightly different like policy ideas or thrown out some different strategies had she had more time to listen to what some of the undecided voters in the Democratic base were looking for. But yeah, like, she didn't really get afforded that opportunity.
And I mean, look at the other side of things, her attempt to reach out to Republicans. She made a huge deal about abortion. That was something she ran very strongly on. And I heard a very interesting kind of back and forth between two analysts earlier this week in the States. And these are guys who were on the ground talking to voters, something that I would have loved. Like, how much fun would it have been going to Trump rallies and just talking to people, right? And learning that kind of stuff. He was saying that the Trump supporters that he was talking to, when he'd bring up the idea of abortion, they would immediately shut him down in the sense that they would say, well, Trump's different. He's not like the other Republicans. He's not actually going to do that. Yeah, this is the policy, but he's not actually going to do that.
But that was one of the things. Let me refer to my notes here. That was one of the things that where is it? No abortion ban. That was one of the things. Like, he said during the debate with her that he would not sign into law a national abortion ban. So that too, he was like, I'll let the states do whatever they want, which I know some people kind of would have, like, on the Democratic side would have preferred, like, no, don't even let the states do what they want. But he did say that he was not going to do a national abortion ban, which I honestly was pretty surprised about. I remember hearing that when I watched the debate, and I was like, guys, whoa. Like, I thought for sure he was
not a Republican saying that.
It's super
So perhaps if she had, not to take away from the importance of the abortion issue at all, but at the same time, I don't think that message landed with the Republicans and the undecideds that she would have had to get in order to win, right? Like, it's not just about holding on to your base. You have to attract from the other side. And, in a way, that might be what happened with Trump. Again, we're still in the early days. There's going to be so much analysis. Not even all the votes have been counted yet.
Yeah. Like, they still don't know definitively. In Arizona, I think they only have like 81% of votes counted.
Yes. We're still figuring out the final counts. But I think there were some miscues in the way Democrats tried to reach out to Republicans. And I think some of the undecided, maybe they didn't like Trump, but they voted for him anyways. And that's a big question. And I think you can think big picture, like, okay, there's a complicated reason, or it's simple. The economy sucks. Inflation is high.
People are mad.
People are mad. They're rejecting the current administration. And again, no primary. You have Kamala, a direct descendant of the Biden administration, a key member running for the presidency. If you're pissed off about the cost of living, if you're pissed off about, pocketbook issues, maybe this is, maybe we're giving Trump too much credit. Maybe this just is a complete rejection of the Biden administration, and it's that simple. I don't know.
I think it is, because it's what we're seeing here in Canada right now.
Yeah.
I don't like calling people dumb,
but I will.
When it comes to certain things like the economy, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an economist and I know a ton about the economy, but I know how to do some research, do some reading, look into stuff. Blaming the federal government for the state of the economy is only like half the battle. A lot of the issues that directly impact the economy come from the provincial level. And I feel like people just like to use whoever's in power on a federal level as the scapegoats. And it's what we're seeing happen here in Canada. It's just everybody blaming Justin Trudeau. And I'm not to say he isn't to blame for some stuff, but thinking that electing a conservative instead of a liberal is going to fix the economy when most of our provinces are run by conservatives and a lot of the fiscal issues we're facing are their decisions. So no, they're not going to fix things as well. Just talking about the states, so I heard so many voters complain about taxes and how much they were paying in taxes. The tax system that they've been under for the last 4 years was implemented by Donald J. Trump, and he wants to extend it when it expires. So I'm like, you're saying he's going to fix the economy and that Biden and Kamala ruin the economy, but if you're referencing taxes, the tax system you're currently under was a Donald Trump thing. They haven't been able to get out of it because was it the House that the Republicans still controlled under Biden, or was it the Senate?
Ooh,
they controlled one of them.
It was one or the other, yeah.
It was like one of these things. And then as well, his tariff thing. Look it up anywhere. All analysts, all economics say this is going to make things cost more for the everyday American.
Yeah, so it's coming out of their pocket.
Yeah.
So these people being like, I'm like, he's not going to be the one to fix it. Like, just point blank period. If you did any research, you would know that he actually might make it worse. And piggybacking off of them saying he fixed the economy after Obama. No, he inherited Obama's economy, which was really good. Inflation was at 2.4% with Obama and went to 2.5 with Trump. Nothing really changed economically until the pandemic hit under Trump. He just was riding what Obama had already set into place. So it's, again, just this critical thinking, and a little bit of research would tell you he's not this economy doctor that you think he is. As well, his immigration plan is going to negatively impact the United States economy because they're going to lose people putting money into the country. They're going to job sectors that are already struggling. I know the construction sector is struggling in the United States, and I think 13% of the construction sector is made up of undocumented workers. I don't think they really realize how much
the impact
undocumented immigrants contribute to their economy on a regular basis.
Well, and then, you talk about negative impacts to America from Donald Trump's proposed immigration, his mass deportation policy. Okay, let's get to that day. What do you think the news media is going to do with videos of families being pulled apart and heartbreaking interviews? And so if you're talking about the USA brand, take the economics out of it. Just talk about what kind of country the United States is. Are they okay being a country that mass deports tens of thousands of people, breaks up families, takes away people who are doing important jobs? I don't know. I don't know what Americans are going to feel when their TV screens, whether they're watching Fox or ABC or CNN, are flooded with images of these horrific scenes of people being pulled apart. So, and that's where you wonder, at least I wonder, how much of this immigration rhetoric is rhetoric? And I know it's not all rhetoric, because we remember what happened when he was actually president, and they were separating families at the border. How much of it is rhetoric, and how much of it are we actually going to see happen?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's the thing. I know people like to say like, "Oh, you're being dramatic when you talk about stuff," but every dictator that currently runs a country was democratically elected at one point or the other. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to say like what is he gonna do? Like realistically, what is he gonna do? I have a thing here that he was asked in 2023 by Fox News if he would abuse his power or target political opponents, and he's like, I won't, except for day one.
Wow. And I mean, like, he ran on an idea of retribution. What's that mean? His whole idea was, I'm going to get in office and I'm going to go for retribution against my enemies. What does that look like? What does he mean? You know? And so
Sounds personal.
You know, and what are we going to see at the DOJ? Who's he going to pick for attorney general for his cabinet? And is that person going to stand up to him, or are they going to go along with it? And what are they going to go along with? There's so many ominous questions at this stage. And I hate to say it, but it's going to take time for all this to come out, because I think the big thing to watch for next is his cabinet. Who's he going to pick to do these jobs? It says a lot that he picked Susan, well, what's her last name? His new chief of staff, the first female White House chief of staff. She's a longtime respected member of the Republican Party. Apparently, one of the conditions of her taking the job was her controlling access to him, because apparently she doesn't want him to be swayed by certain voices. So, like, you know, remember in the last administration, Joe Blow would walk into his office and say, oh, yeah, this is horrible. And then all of a sudden he'd be making decisions off bad advice.
Yeah.
So this time around, with a woman like Susan Wills, I can't remember her last name. I almost want to look it up. It's
yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to look it up. But, you know, is she going to control him? Can she control him?
Yeah.
And what does that mean?
And what is she view? Because that's the thing too, right? It's what everybody from his last administration said. He doesn't know what he's doing.
No, he has no idea. It all comes down to his advice.
He's just loud and yelly. So what are her policy ideas? What are her thoughts about where America's going? Because if she's going to be controlling who he has access to, what advice he's getting, what decisions he's making, like, first of all, are you even the president at that point? Second of all, it could be an entirely different set of policies and an administration than he promised if she's going to be the one kind of being like, no, you can't talk to this person.
The
no, you
puppeteer.
can't right?
Exactly. Susie Wiles. I was off on Susie.
Okay.
Susie Wiles. So as much as I think this will be similar to the previous Trump administration, we're already seeing some things that make it different. And there's so many directions I could go right now. To be honest, there's so many things we could talk about.
Mentioning his administration, him saying he's going to put RFK Jr.
Oh, yeah.
It's the health portfolio.
Yeah.
He's a literal conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Like, whether or not he wanted to get the COVID vaccine aside, he literally is a conspiracy theorist about healthcare stuff. And you're going to let him be in charge of healthcare decisions for the entire country?
Yeah, seems like a smart idea, right?
Yeah.
He also wants to plug Elon Musk in somewhere. That guy's a certified dumbass. I hate to say it.
I would be shocked if Musk isn't a top member of his administration in some way or another. I'm not saying he's going to be a member of the cabinet or anything, but it seems like him and Dana White are going to be...
And Dana White!
Dana White. Oh, yeah, there's this great photo, I don't know if you've seen it, of Dana White, Musk, and him having a 3-person conversation at Mar-a-Lago the night of the election. It's wild. Yeah, you got to look it up. It's quite the thing. But, you know, this is... And then,
again, people who don't know anything about politics, he's like, yeah, help me run the country. Like, it's so hard to wrap my head around him saying too that he wants to like gut the Department of Education.
Imagine too though how much of an insult that would be to like somebody who's actually in politics, and then you see people like Elon Musk and Dana White coming in. It's like, well, excuse me, I've been here this whole time.
Yeah.
Because I think part of also what he's being wary about is that after his last term, everybody who worked with him, with the exception of Steve Bannon, were like, this guy's a clown.
Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's doing. He's an idiot. He made bad decisions. I think he's worried about that happening again. He wants to seem smarter and more capable.
Well, and there was
this time.
so much turnover in his administration. There were new people all the time, and that hurts things. You know, like we can say whatever we want about politicians, but at the end of the day, these are difficult jobs that really only smart people can do. You put stupid people in this,
You're going to have stupid outcomes.
there you go, right? So, okay, maybe this time around he's picked Susie Wiles. Maybe he is trying to differentiate from last time because it takes time to build on things. Okay, what his whole thing on election night, promises made, promises kept. Well, if he's going to keep those promises, he needs people to actualize his policies. And you can't put someone in an office for, okay, you get 6 months, and then, I don't like how you're doing it. Let's bring someone else in. Nothing's ever going to get done that way. So if he actually is promises made, promises kept. Now, let's be on the other side of that. Let's be real scaremongering. He cannot run for another term. He's constitutionally barred from running for another term. So are the handcuffs completely off?
But can he get SCOTUS to make it so that he can run for another term? Like,
I guess
They
we'll
have
find
to
out.
change the Constitution, but I mean, they've never changed the Constitution.
No, I
so
know,
probably
but, like-
not, but yeah.
And I don't know. Based on how Americans talk about like their democracy and their government, I'm surprised more people weren't turned off by him simply because of the events of January 6th and the transfer of power and the stealing of state secrets and I saw it was I think CBS went to like a Republican stronghold town in a Republican stronghold state and actually spoke to a lot of old white men who were like, no, we're voting for Kamala because what he did goes against our democracy, goes against the government. He tried to overthrow the government, like Republican or not, that is unacceptable. And I thought, because that's like a lot of Americans are like, that's their thing, the Constitution, like our government, like, I thought a lot more people would be turned off of him because of that.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
I was surprised that wasn't a deal breaker. But then again, I thought people wouldn't want a convicted felon for their president. Thought people wouldn't want a sexual abuser as their president. But they were all like, nah, that's fine. That's chill.
Live,
In
laugh,
fact,
love.
a majority do. A majority do.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
You know, it's like if you're not a Trump supporter, you're in the minority. Now, I know it's still very close, and I'm not trying to suggest that he represents the political views of most Americans. Because like I said, I have a feeling that a lot of the reason why he won is pocketbook, bread and butter issues. We're sick of the Biden administration. Can't get any worse. I'm broke. Inflation's high. The cost of everything's out of control. This, you know, I'm not willing to give him too much credit in this.
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is, okay, maybe it's a combination, and maybe America is recalibrating. Maybe what America wants. Because, I mean, Trump's policies, foreign policy, America, since the end of the World War II, their foreign policy has been active, out there. Global police, involved in NATO, involved in UN,
everything.
Everything. He doesn't want that. He, you know, like the concerns are, is he going to keep funding Ukraine? Is what's going to happen there? Israel, that's a whole other thing. He has very close ties with Netanyahu. So theoretically, you would think, okay, they're going to keep funding Israel like they always have. However, his foreign policy is a rejection of the old foreign policy. And the old foreign policy was always 100% let's support Israel.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see potentially a real change in some of the key policies of America. Or we won't. He is such
I don't know.
you know, it's such a quagmire.
it's a
He's such
coin
an enigma.
toss.
Yeah.
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 I could see, like, at least globally, I could see the argument there with him because, I mean, there's a lot of sociopathic leaders.
Yeah.
And he kind of aligns in that too. So, like, I
loves
see.
strong men.
Exactly. So, like, he can definitely hold his footing there. So, I see that side of it. Comparing to the Democrats.
Yep.
But otherwise, like, any like domestic policy and everything else, I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know about him.
Yeah, that would literally be the only thing that I would like take as a positive from Trump is if he did kind of lower America's standing in foreign policy, because me personally, it drives me nuts that they think they have to be involved in everything. I'm like, just keep your freaking nose out of other people's business, because they exacerbate problems.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
Which is fair.
You know, like thinking of the Middle East, obviously you don't just want to leave those people high and dry, but at the same time, I feel like their involvement makes things worse for the people who are like anti-Israel and anti-US.
Well,
right?
sure, because if they weren't involved, Israel wouldn't have the support it has, and
But then, which also I think makes Israel go harder. Because
they know.
Yeah, because
the backing.
they know that but they also know that they're going to get that reaction from places like Iran and places like Lebanon. Like, they know, like, the U.S.'s involvement is going to make them strike. And then that gives us just cause to strike back. Like, it's like they want that, right?
Yep.
And I said that to Nicole when we were working on Trending Now and this whole thing broke. I was like, why does America have to be involved in everything? Like, everything. Like, keep your freaking nose out of it for, like, once in your life.
Yeah.
So I would take that as a slight positive if Trump was going to, like, be like, we're not going to be, like, a global police anymore, because there's ways to keep people safe and be involved in foreign policy without being the deciding factor on everything, because who died and made the U.S. king of the world? Like, I hate that.
Nuclear weapons.
Well, yeah, but they're not the only people with nuclear weapons.
Yeah, but they have like
They're the
10
they're the
times
Western
the
countries
most
with
of
their
any
weapons.
other.
Their
like,
military
Yeah.
budget
even the
is
Russians,
just
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Like, the reason America is in charge, and the logic behind it since World War II has been peace through strength, right? That old adage of you prepare for peace by preparing for war, which is I'm not advocating that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's where it's all rooted, in this idea of, okay, never again, Pearl Harbor's never going to happen again, because we're going to have our military all over the world, and they're never going to be able to sneak up on us. Of course, don't mention 9/11.
and if they
That
did,
Yeah.
they would be the hammer would be brought down on them.
Right, exactly. You know, that has been so much of who America has been on a foreign policy thing. But
Yeah.
Trump is a disruptor. Trump likes strong men. You can't predict what he's going to do. I mean, you're talking about a guy who in his last administration stood up beside Putin, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, in Finland, and actually said to the world, I believe him over U.S. intelligence. I don't know if you guys remember that press conference, but they'd had
Vaguely.
a head-to-head meeting in Finland. They came out, there was all this reporting about Russia doing something bad, Russia doing
As
shitty
usual.
stuff. And he came out and he said, basically, I don't believe U.S. intelligence, I believe Vladimir. Like, that's
That's out-of-pocket
crazy.
thing to say.
Well, yeah, it's like, not only are you going against, if the president doesn't believe U.S. intel, why would anyone else, right? It's a dangerous comment.
It is a dangerous comment,
He's a
for
dangerous
sure.
guy.
I would have to agree with you there. And he's going to have, I think, a lot more control this time over decisions that he's making, because he did get the Senate. The Republicans got the Senate, and they're 7 seats away from controlling the House.
Yeah.
Which, as we saw last year, like, even though they only had like 2 extra seats or whatever, it was a disaster. They couldn't get anything done. Couldn't even elect a House Speaker.
Oh, I know.
Ridiculous.
Remember, we did a couple things on Trending Now on that.
That was
eh?
endless. I think Kevin
Yeah.
McCarthy had to go through like, what, 30 votes?
It
or
was
something?
ridiculous, yeah.
It was so
was
mental.
nuts.
But so I think if he has that, he's gonna have. It's gonna be easier for him to do stuff, because. So for like people who might not know, the House initiates budget bills and proceedings to impeach a president. So it's like stuff like that. So he won't get impeached this time around if he controls the House like he did last time. He got impeached because he didn't control the House. And then the Senate has the power to confirm presidential appointees, which is the ambassadors in
Right.
the Supreme Court of the USA. So I think he might get a lot more stuff done. And as we've seen, I think in the last 8 years, everybody knows politicians are shady. I think we've seen it a lot more in the last 8 years,
Yep.
just the kind of deals they're willing to accept, the kind of morals they're willing to
All
let
the stuff
go.
we don't see as regular people.
Yeah, like, and just, so I think he's going to get a lot of policy changes through if what you were saying, he doesn't have as much turnover in his administration.
And if he can get it together, because, again, whatever happened traditionally, so when Obama first won, he won the House, the Senate, the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
But very quickly at the midterms, he lost, I can't remember which, either the Senate or the House. And so even if Trump gets all three, historically,
It'll shift.
It will. So yes, he may still have one, either the Senate or the House, plus the presidency. But I think his window for having complete control will be 2 years. It'll be 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I think the midterms will happen. And then
People will be like, oh God.
people always get sick of their governments, right? They always vote them out eventually. And I mean, you want to talk about parallels with Trudeau. Like in Canadian politics, prime ministers, no matter who they are, 10 years is a long stretch.
Yeah.
That's a long time. And this guy came in with baggage.
Yep.
So, if there's a parallel there in that people get really sick of politicians. So even if Trump is number one now, it can't last forever. And like I said, the Constitution bars him from going again. So we're talking about 4 years maximum, unless, like you suggested,
I don't know.
some crazy stuff happens.
If we want to go worst case scenario, I don't know. I think it's
January
gonna be
6th all over again. That's
well,
maybe
yeah,
the
and then
worst
he's
case
gonna pardon
scenario.
all those people anyways, so then they can just go and do it again.
Did you see they're already, one of the guys on trial for that has already put forward a motion to have his charges dropped based on Trump's claim that he would pardon all the January 6th people? Yeah, that came out just a couple days ago. So there's
Just
still
based on
people
the claim.
Just based on the claim. Well, it's similar to like when Trudeau came out during the 2015 election and said, okay, cannabis is going to be legal. A lot of people use that as a
to be
legal
like,
way
okay,
to say,
well,
okay, well
why
then
should I
drop
still
my
be in
charges.
jail?
Why should I be charged if the leader of our country? So anyways,
makes sense.
It'll be
Which makes
interesting to
sense.
see what happens with those January 6th guys.
America is so like funny to me because I'm like, it's the way they're so. If Trump says it, woo. If he doesn't say it, boo.
Yeah.
And like I just think it's annoying to try to compare everything, but you kind of almost have to because like had the election been won by Trump in 2020 and then it was Democrats who did what happened on January 6th, we would never hear the end of it.
Oh,
like
no.
it would be like the Republicans would be like, this is absolutely unacceptable. Like how dare, like da-da-da. But because it was their party who did it, they're like, well, okay, it wasn't great, but like, let's relax a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And I saw, because obviously there was a lot, like you were saying, talking to voters and like hearing different opinions and stuff like that. And, they'll try to like trick the Republicans because, again, a lot of the Republican voters are uneducated. It's exit polls prove that. And they'll try to trick them and say like, oh, Kamala's doing this. What do you think about that? That's the worst thing I've ever heard. I can't believe she'd even try. And then they'd be like, oh, sorry, I misread my notes. It's actually Trump doing that. And then they do a 180 and they're like, oh, well, that's actually, it's not as bad as you might. And it's like, can you have a brain or a backbone to like.
Well, and doesn't that speak to the polarization of America? That it really doesn't matter what the policy is.
just-
I'm with one team or the other.
Exactly. And it's so crazy. And it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. It's like, but I feel like that's the conservative mindset. Like even here in Canada, like they just assume that because I voted Liberal, I'm like a Trudeau crony and like, or like Trudeau mob. And like, it's like, no, because I actually can look at this person that I voted for and been like, I didn't vote for that. I don't like the decision you made there. Maybe I don't want to vote for you next time. Like, and they can't wrap their heads around that because they wouldn't ever think to vote any other way but conservative or but Republican. And they can't wrap their heads around the fact that the people on the other side actually can be like, I would maybe vote conservative one time. I would maybe vote in Canada NDP one time because I'm not tied to the party. I'm tied to the ideas and the policies.
I feel like too, part of the issue, at least in the States, is the fact that really they only kind of have like two options.
Yes.
Like you're not, those like little other options aren't actually options to them.
Yeah.
Sorry to say. But that's also kind of their problem is like it's like flipping a pillow over. It's like, okay, well, there's a stain here, but there's also a stain on the other side. It's like, you don't really have much option over there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's fair. It's a two-party system. Anytime a third party tries to get in, it doesn't go well. So you're right. You're constrained in that. And I think like the polarization is so strong and so tied to emotions on both sides, liberal, conservative. There are people who are just so emotionally involved in this that I think, what you described is a perfect example of that. It's like, well, if my candidate said it, it's right, no matter what. I don't know how you get over that, though, because it seems to be a real moment in our society, in Canada and in the U.S., but more so in the
Yeah.
U.S., where we have become so polarized.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's because, like, again, I hate to say it, I don't know if it's because a lot of people who lean right are less educated. Like, and I don't want to say that they're not educated, but
Well,
that's part of the Republican Party's like platform in the States, is like to target education, because they know that the more educated you are, the less likely you are to vote for them. It's this cult of celebrity that they have, right? Where it's like, it is kind of like a cult. Like one of the big things that was happening this election was those Jubilee debates, where they would get one Republican and then like 20 Democrats, and then they would do one Democrat and 20 Republicans. It was a big thing. And I remember watching one where it was the one Democrat versus the 20 Republicans, and he said to the guy, he's like, what you're doing is like a cult, because you can't acknowledge that there might be some problems with the presidential candidate you support. And he said to the guy, like, say one bad thing about Trump. It doesn't even have to be a political bad thing. Like, you don't like his hair. You don't like the way he, like, you know what I mean? Like, say one bad thing about him. And the guy straight up was like, I have nothing bad to say about him. And he's like, that's cult. That's like a cult. Like, you can't view these people as like this, like, I'm obsessed with this person, as if they are a celebrity, as if they are like an idol.
Yeah.
And I have nothing bad to say about them because I love them so much, because that's not realistic. Like, you love your family members, and you could say bad stuff about your family members. Like, love does not have to be unconditional.
Yeah.
And also, they are a politician. They should be flawed. You should be able to discern when they're making bad calls or when they're saying things that aren't great, instead
That's
of just
the point of democracy.
Exactly. Instead of just sweeping a terrible comment under the rug or saying, well, no, he didn't mean that. Like, you need to be able to look at these people and call them out on their shit.
You should be, but Trump, he's one of those guys where if you said anything negative about him, you're done. You know, so I think about sometimes, like that example there, you know, maybe politicians, like all politicians, just really want to keep their jobs.
Yeah,
And
well,
even
yeah.
if they're Republicans, it's like, I'm not going to say anything bad about Trump, because if I do, maybe I'm not going to survive the next time around. But I don't know that 100%. I'm not an expert on the mindsets of American voters. I will say, though, we now live in a time where Americans knew what they were picking.
Yep.
They knew this guy. You know, 2016, you could have argued it was a surprise. It was a rejection. They weren't ready for a female president, whatever you want to say. But in 2024, they picked the guy with the criminal record, the guy who says awful things, the guy who says he wants to mass deport tens of thousands of people and go after his enemies. That was the choice. So whatever, I guess I'm just saying that to say, it's like we are in a new reality where you can't just say, well, America got it wrong. No, this is what America wants.
Which is so
And I think it's
crazy.
because they're just so mad. Kind of like in Canada, like we're all just, even just driving on the road, people are just more pissed off. They're driving more angry. It's like everyone's just so pissed off at what happened with the pandemic, after the pandemic, and how much that actually impacted society. I don't think people like have realized.
But I
agree.
think what
I
also
agree.
people, to piggyback off of that with the pandemic, what a lot of people are not taking into account, that it was every single government's first,
Exactly.
in the modern time, first time dealing with something like this. They were learning and dealing with it at the same time as we all were. So to
completely fault a government for that.
for what happened, you just can't. Like, it's not fair, because they were trying their best as well, you know? Like, I remember at one point Ontario was the only place in the world that didn't have golf courses open. Like, how random. But like, they were just trying to do their best. They were like, how can we minimize casualties? And like, how is this gonna impact the, like, nobody could have known.
No, and you can't say like, oh, well, they should have done it this way. Because it's like, well, if they did it that way, you don't know what the outcome would have been because we didn't do it that way.
Yeah.
It could have been
And we'll
worse
never
for
know.
all we know.
Yeah. And you're coming through a time where I've kind of intimated there are patterns, right? Like in Canada, we have shifted between a liberal and conservative government since our inception. So however Trudeau handled COVID, his time's up.
Yep.
Right?
Just
So
even if that hadn't happened.
even if COVID hadn't happened, I still think we'd be looking at Pierre Poilievre being the next prime minister.
It might just not have been as polarizing, but it still would have been.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it just seems that way. Because even when you look at Chrétien, who was a pretty well-loved liberal prime minister, who led into Paul Martin. Paul Martin didn't have long. He was only prime minister for what? 2-3 years?
Yeah, it wasn't long.
It wasn't long because people get to a stage where we're not happy with the way things are. It can't get any worse, so I'm going for the other guy. And I don't care who the other guy is.
Yeah.
And that's why that's really part of what I think happened with Trump.
Yeah.
I think people, maybe they didn't like him. Maybe they thought he was misogynist. Maybe they thought his immigration stuff was crazy. But they were so concerned about the bread and butter issues that it's like, well, fuck it. I'm going to give it a try.
Yeah. I guess I just can't wrap my head around that because I would never be that person. Like, I
Totally.
would never be able to be like, oh, this person is a bigot. They say racist stuff. They say homophobic stuff. They're a misogynist. But I'm real upset with inflation, so I'm going to vote for him anyway.
And
like, I just couldn't.
Yeah.
I just couldn't.
And you're right. He's a bigot and a racist. Yet he attracted more voters of color this time
Which
than
is
any other
scary.
time.
It's scary.
Yeah, or
Or they just think it's
this
just
is
this. It's
true.
what's,
It's like-
but it's not. It's not going to be me though.
It's not going to be me. And well, I don't care if he says shitty things about Hispanic people. I still think
As
he's
long
the
as
guy
he
who's gonna
fixes the
bring me a
economy.
job. Yeah, I'm going to make more money. My kids are going to be able to go to university with Trump at the helm. And so what? He says shitty things about people of my ethnicity. I can live with that. I don't know that, and I'm a white person, so
Yeah,
obviously I can't
we can't.
imagine. But
We can't accurately speak to that.
how
side
else
of
do you
things.
explain black people coming out en masse to vote for him? Hispanic
still,
people coming
though-
out en masse to vote for him.
Still, it was black people was like the lowest number
Sure.
who voted for him, the highest number who voted for Kamala out of all the, including
Sure.
white people. Like they were the highest. But
I'm just talking when you
I
compare
agree.
2016
Yeah.
to 2024.
Yeah.
Right.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like things have changed. He attracted people who you would never think would vote for Trump, but they did.
yeah,
Crazy.
I don't know.
It's just like, how much do you think this man's going to fix your economy? Like, you're putting that much
question.
faith into him?
Yeah.
When again,
question.
here's where I get into like the critical thinking and just like basic like, let's do some fact checking skills. Anything you look up about him in his whole career as a businessman is not good.
No.
So I'm like, why is this the guy? Just because he had like a show where he like hired and fired people, why is this the guy who you think is like great with money? When any sort of research, you're like, oh wait, maybe he's not actually great with money. It's the same thing with like Elon Musk. Like, yes, the man's a billionaire, but it's like literally just because of Tesla.
Yeah.
Like any other business decision he's made outside of Tesla hasn't been good.
Yeah.
Like I have a cousin who she's in sales. She's like very like connected with like business communities in Toronto, and like they're constantly like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's like wild that like he's even still making that much money from Tesla, because that's becoming like, but that's also just because it's like the only mass produced electric car available right now. And people are still down to switch to that. And again, the cult of celebrity, he's Elon Musk, let's buy his stuff. But like these people aren't actually good with money.
Well,
So trusting them, they can't even like budget their own lives. And then you're going to trust them to like budget how many people live in the United States? 500 million people's lives? I don't know. Like, wild.
well, and then also it's like, you think about Musk, you think about the billionaires who rallied around this guy. They're all going to make bank now that he's in the office. His policies from his first term show that he is going to help out the wealthy at the expense of the less wealthy, the average people. And it's interesting.
rich.
As soon as you brought up Elon Musk, I started thinking about SpaceX and its contracts with the U.S. government to bring people and stuff up into space.
Stop
'Cause we
space
need that.
exploration. Stop space exploration.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Do you like? I wonder, and I don't know, but maybe now SpaceX makes a ton of money because Trump helps Musk
Even
get some
more government
contracts. You know,
contracts.
like I really don't know. This just occurred to me when you brought him up, but I wonder if SpaceX becomes a much more profitable company under this because of Trump. Because certainly other billionaires are going to do well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, UFC is
why-
probably going to be in every city in America by the end of the 4-year
Priorities.
Oh my God.
right? Dana White expansion.
I don't know. And I think too, where I'm also seeing this cognitive dissonance is here in Canada. And people in Canada being like, yeah, Trump won. And I'm like, do you guys, again, understand how this is going to impact us?
The day
It's
after,
not in a good way.
I literally saw like a decked out, like, you know, the hockey stick with the Canadian flag that had writing all over it, like the fuck Trudeau stickers, the pro Trump like rhetoric, just driving around the day after the election. And I'm like, buddy, we're in Canada. Also, relax. Also, why do you see that as a good thing?
I think they see it as a sign that
There's
Poilievre's
change
gonna
coming
win.
here.
Yeah, that's
But
what I
that's-
think.
The fuck Trudeau flags too. That's another example of how Trump has changed politics and like
Yeah.
emboldened people to
He like
more
encourages
out-
this negative rhetoric.
and be more outspoken about stuff that it's like, oh, we were scared, and it's like, well, you're scared to say it because it's shit stuff. Like
Yeah.
you're saying racist, homophobic, garbage stuff. Like that's not like scared to say it. It's like you straight up shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
It's hate speech, like period. But also just that, like, when in Canada's history, even as much as somebody might have hated a prime minister, like I think just before Trudeau, Harper, people were
Yeah,
sick
we were
of
done
that
with
guy.
Harper.
Everybody was like, fuck that guy, like screw him, we're done with him. When have you ever seen people with the flags,
Right?
with the merch,
Yeah.
like being like an anti or even a pro politician in Canada? Never.
Yeah,
until Trump became a thing, and then it was like, oh, let's make some fuck Trudeau flags, like, and then I was all of a sudden a thing.
Yeah.
And and again, it's like, these people don't deserve, I don't care if they're the leader of our country, they don't deserve this much attention.
No.
Oh, I
or
agree.
like energy, effort, like just
Period.
drop it.
Well, the idea that one person is so responsible for all the problems.
Exactly.
That's always rubbed me the wrong way, whether you're liberal or conservative.
Yeah.
It's not reflective of the truth. And I mean, listen, Justin Trudeau, you can say lots of things. I think most people know, like, he's not the brilliant policy guy his father was.
No.
And his father was hated too. His father was polarizing. And so I think there's a certain amount of older Canadians who didn't like Trudeau Sr., who were already predisposed to not like Trudeau Jr. And then the problem with Trudeau is when he came in on this change agenda. It was
Yeah.
a change election. Same way Obama's was a change election in 2008. And while, I don't really hate Trudeau or anything like that. I'm of the opinion that individual people aren't that responsible.
Yeah,
it comes down
exactly.
to governments, policies, voting. He didn't do that much. No. He promised a lot. He legalized pot. I mean, he still hasn't changed the electoral system. That
Yeah.
was a huge promise that they were going to
should have
change
been done.
first past the
He
post.
just did like an interview about
saw
that, where
that.
he
Yeah.
was like, he's like, I wish I wouldn't have let people sway me
Well, and
away from
I'm,
that.
I'm
Because
sure.
and that's exactly what you're saying. It's not just one person. He literally acknowledged, he's like, I wanted so badly to hear out everybody's opinion that I heard too many opinions and let people sway what my core thing was and what a lot of people like voted for me because of.
Because I think a lot of people, when it was clear he wasn't going to change the way elections are won in Canada, was like, oh, so you're just like all of them. You care about winning. That's all
Yeah.
you care about. Because if you change first past the post, winning a majority government becomes exceptionally difficult.
Yep.
You keep the system the way it is, well, then you got a shot at another majority government. So I think, for a lot of Canadians, you look at that and you're like, oh, Justin, you came in with big promises, but
What did you do?
you didn't really do that much.
But I think too, I sent you a tweet. Unfortunately, it got deleted because I was gonna reference it. But it was like about where Canada is like currently sitting and some of the stuff that we have going on.
Right.
And it's actually like really like positive and like impressive and like, you know,
I saw that.
remember
I
it
did
was
see that,
Economic
yeah.
stuff or
just on like some like stuff that we've done. Like
GDP.
it had to do with like immigration, like job growth, like even just like population growth, like industry growth. Like we were like hitting like a bunch of like marks that like the guy referred to it as like a progressive's dream, like
Right.
and it's kind of being like all like overshadowed obviously by this like giant like inflation talk and like the housing and that stuff.
Housing
But at
and
the same
affordability.
time, Canada, when you compare us to other G7 countries, we actually have one of the better inflation rates out of like the G7 countries.
sure, but tell that to someone at the grocery store.
Exactly, right?
and they
It's
don't
like
give a shit.
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people who are like cheering on, a lot of Canadians who are cheering on this Trump win, flies back.
Flashback.
Get it.
It's a big fly.
I need to get a fly swatter.
So like some of this stuff, we export 75% of our goods and services to the U.S. and 10% tariffs on that are gonna cause problems, not just for us, but for the states as well. This thing I got here from the Business Development Bank of Canada estimated that the 10% tariff move by Trump could subtract $7 billion from Canada's GDP and drive the Canadian dollar down, which, as we've seen, it's really hard for a prime minister like to just make like a significant like like it's you can try your best, but like you're kind of like in a box,
You've
right?
seen they're already circling the wagons in Ottawa.
Yeah.
I mean, they convened that council that they had stopped convening. It was the
Yeah.
Canada-U.S. relations thing with Chrystia Freeland in charge. They're prepared for Trump to want to renegotiate the Canada-America-Mexico pact.
That was in there too, which is going to be a problem.
That's a thing. And like what you've mentioned a few times, the idea that he's going to impose a 10% tariff on all imports to the United States. I actually heard one figure that $7 billion to the GDP. I can't remember, but this was just before the election day. One business group was saying it's going to have a $30 billion impact on Canada. And again, it's all numbers. It's all hard to grasp because it hasn't happened yet, and we don't really know what's going to happen. But I think there is definitely a consensus among the Canadian business community that he could actually be very negative for our economy, depending on what happens.
100%. Part of it here was saying U.S. states and Canadian provinces, like specifically who trade. So Ontario, Quebec, Alberta, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and then in the states, Montana, Michigan, Illinois, and Texas. Like we rely on each other for significant percentages of our provincial and state economies. So like that's going to be an issue if we can't trade as easily. Or there's the thing that not many people have been talking about, but if Trump imposes those tariffs, like who's to say we might not do retaliatory ones?
True.
Like,
Right.
Yeah.
like especially if we end up switching to
To
a
a
conservative
conservative.
government,
Yep.
they might want to do retaliatory tariffs, and
You're
that's
absolutely
just going to
right.
tank it even more. And I have a quote from this a professor at Carleton, a business professor, who said that it will reveal itself through our dollar. So we export 1/3 of our GDP. We also import 1/3 of our GDP, and when the dollar tanks, as many economists are predicting it will with these tariffs, if they actually go through
with them, yeah.
it's going to drive up the cost of food.
Yep.
It's going to drive up the cost of tractors, computers, like cars, like, and again, so that's why I'm like, these Canadians being like, "Ooh,
They
Trump,
just have
let's
no
go."
idea.
I'm like, you're mad at our economy now. It's going to get even worse, and there's not going to be really much that our government's going to be able to do about it, because they can only try to absorb the issue of tariffs if they're not willing to impose retaliatory ones on us. Like
It'll still be
It's gonna be
Trudeau's fault
tough.
in their head. It'll
for
still
sure.
be his
Yeah.
fault.
for sure.
But I mean, at the same time, like we're coming up to a federal election here.
Yeah.
100%.
And so it will be interesting. Let's say Poilievre wins, game that out. Let's say Trump goes through with these tariffs. How's Poilievre handle it?
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know.
Will he just be like, okay, cool, thanks, Trump? Like, I'm
Yeah.
interested to see how he's actually gonna be if he becomes prime minister, because Poilievre talks a big ass game, And half the time I'm like, man, if you were the prime minister, you would be doing the same thing.
Well, and
like when he shit all over Trudeau for going to the Queen's funeral. I'm like, if you were the prime minister, you would have done that too.
I mean,
like, what are you
and
talking
as a
about?
Canadian, of course the prime minister should be at the
Yeah,
Queen's
like,
funeral.
that's
But that's what I
fucking
mean.
crazy
He like
to
gives
say.
him, or just
Yeah.
like calling Trudeau out for going on like vacation. I'm like, brother, just because he's the prime minister doesn't mean he doesn't deserve to have some time off. I'm sure you would take some time.
Well,
So I'm interested to see, because he talks such a
Yeah.
big game of like, I'm not going to do what he does. I'm interested to see if he'll keep that big game up. And part of that big game, I would think, would be to be
Head to head,
retaliatory with
yeah.
the tariffs,
Yep.
right? Or if he'll shrink and be like, oh, I don't want to anger the U.S. I don't want to anger Trump. Like,
He'll
we'll
have
deal with
to.
it.
He'll have to do similarly to how Trudeau did in the first one, in that you have to stand up to them but keep them happy at
Yes.
the same time. And I'm sure you remember from working in news, Freeland was down in Washington all the time
Mm-hmm.
during those negotiations. And Trump didn't like Freeland very much, but that's because Freeland actually, and I hate to say it, it's a low bar. We didn't lose anything in that renegotiation, but we sure as hell didn't gain anything, And so maybe that's what happens again when it's renegotiated in 26. Maybe the best case scenario is we don't lose anything more, but I don't know. It's
Well,
going
yeah,
to be
people
hard to.
I saw people were saying Canada might, in those negotiations, have to do some concessions. So like
think
that,
so.
the digital tax that we
I
just
know
did, they might
they're-
have to get rid of that,
And
which we
the
fought
US
so hard
Congress
for.
is very against that. There's
Yeah.
a lot of Americans who are against that, and it appears that the Conservative government in Toronto, Premier Doug Ford, is willing to concede on that, because he's made comments that we should be listening to our American friends who are saying they don't want this tax. Maybe we should listen to them, and we don't want to penalize our American friends, So, and remember, Ford said day after the election, Ontario is going on a charm offensive in Washington. And we interviewed Ontario's representative, David Patterson, I think it's Patterson, who is going to Washington to represent Ontario interests. And there's certainly this feeling, at least with our provincial government, that step one is, let's go down and make nice and see what happens. Before there's
before
any
we
kind of
jump.
anything,
Yeah.
let's go see if we can make nice. Because I think if you talk to state governors along the Canadian border, they know how important the Canadian relationship is. They know how much trade and goods and services come across the border. But Trump's a bombastic guy. He's going to say shit. He shoots from the hip.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he fully understands that it will impact Americans negatively too, because there are Americans who
yeah.
rely on Canada,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
There are
that's what I was saying,
Americans who
those
work in
states.
warehouses, and those goods come to Canada. So if
Yeah.
Canadians aren't buying them, how's that guy going to get a paycheck?
Yep. And then again, just like I had it somewhere here, these big companies. If past tariffs are any indication, consumers will see higher prices in the U.S. because there's companies who have already warned investors they'll be raising prices if the tariffs go through. And the tariffs that he put in 2018 and 2019 led to higher prices for washing machines, handbags, tires, shoes, like so many other things. And I saw a lot of comments on something like that where people were like, well, that's okay. It'll bring the jobs to the U.S. It won't actually, because that was, again, when he did that, it didn't lead to a significant number of companies relocating to the U.S. or create domestic jobs. It led to a reduction in manufacturing employment when it came to the steel and aluminum tariffs.
I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, so it's like it's this wishful thinking, but like the actual realistic side of it is it's not going to be good for Americans and it's not going to be good for us. I think too what a lot of racist Canadians don't realize is we're going to see a surge in immigrants in the U.S. now coming here because they're not going to want to go back to South America.
That's what the Quebec premier is warning about. He says that there's going to be an influx of migrants from America coming into Canada. And, think about those migrants. They're going to encounter a country where the federal government has just come out and said, you know what?
Screw you
The
guys.
immigration targets are too high. We're letting in too many people. We're going to ramp it down. And I think you talk to a lot of Canadians, there's an acknowledgement that the high levels of immigration are contributing to the housing and the affordability crisis. And I think most Canadians you talk to are very pro-immigration. But as long as that immigration makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think the conversation is now going to shift to, okay, less immigration, please, and immigration that maybe is tied to housing starts or the job market or other things of that nature. Because I think we are coming into a time in Canada where immigration is going to be less popular than it has been.
Well, we don't really have the infrastructure to support that influx of immigration that we've seen.
That's the thing, you know, like there's been a lot of talk about like if the feds are going to bring people in, they have to have a plan.
Yeah.
Because it's not fair to the people who come in and then say, hey, so it's a completely unaffordable housing market. We know you've given all of your money to this international school for this degree that means absolutely nothing. You know, don't get me started on these international schools.
It drives me nuts.
You know,
So that's part of the problem. If we didn't other where these immigrants are coming from so much, we would see much more positive impact to our society and our economy. If we didn't tell, like I think of our old coworker Sylvie, her father came from Hungary. He had a degree there that he's not allowed to use here.
Sure.
And it's
My
like
mom too.
Just so your mom from Italy. It's just like, let's not other what they're doing so much. Like I think of an engineering degree, I think of a nursing degree, a doctor. It's all the same. There's just slightly different policies for each country. So you bring them over, they want to come here, you say sure, you let their degree stand, and you just make them take like a year course to just get up to speed with what our regulations in that field are here in Canada, instead of just telling them that their degree means absolutely nothing. So then the only way they can contribute to the Canadian economy and society is in lower paying, less, not to say they're less important jobs, but like less important jobs, when we could be bringing them in and having them do higher income jobs, which means they're gonna spend more money on our economy. That would be my how can we make immigration work for us better, right? Is in that sense.
I think you're right. But that's a long-standing problem. So it's, you know, that's something that certainly we're going to have to see what the Conservative government does. Because even the Liberals coming out and saying, okay, we're gonna take it down a notch. Best case scenario, I really do strongly believe we're going to have a Conservative government, whether it's a minority or a majority, within the next year or so. You know, I don't see it going any other way. I mean, I guess time will tell.
I think
NDP's picking up some.
That's what I said.
some traction.
So I think we could get a minority, because I think more people. I think you'll still get a large chunk voting for Liberal, and I think more people will vote for NDP, which would.
It's possible. I worry that Jagmeet has kind of hit the maximum number of people who he will attract. It doesn't feel like he made much improvement in the last election. It feels like he's plateaued.
I'd be more
Maybe
surprised if it was a minority Conservative than if it was like a majority Conservative, because I am anticipating that we're going to end up with the majority Conservative at this point.
It's certainly possible. I mean, people in the suburbs are disaffected with the way society has become, it seems. You know, everybody is shocked with the cost of everything. Everybody thinks things could be better. Maybe that's hangover from COVID. Maybe that's hangover from having the same government for 10 years. I don't know. I think all we can really say with certainty is that there is going to be some changes in this next election.
Change is imminent.
Change is coming.
For sure.
And whatever that change is going to be impacted by the fact that Trump became president.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm just hopeful people don't forget, or like, you know, like I think like the core of being like a Canadian is that we like look out for each other, right? And I think like kind of what you were saying, I don't know if Jagmeet has made any headway. I think maybe his attempts at helping people through that partnership he made with the Liberals might work in his favor. Like, as much as people want to try and complain that like, oh, I hate how much money we give to the government, and how things that money is used for could be better. Like I think of healthcare, you really can't deny that we have free healthcare. You can't deny that now we're giving like standard prescriptions, giving them to people for free.
The dental
you can't deny
plan.
that now we're getting free dental care. Like I think that's like really important, and I hope people don't forget that at our core, Canada's really good. at helping each other out and using our tax dollars to try and make life slightly better. It's tough with the housing market because you can't really regulate that. It's tough with food because you can't really regulate that. They are trying with that grocery coalition or whatever.
And then you
But
have like
there
stuff
are
like
areas where
external things like the war that impact grocery bills and stuff.
Yep.
But there are like ways that we can be like, okay, how can we maximize our tax dollars? So if we can't help people when it comes to housing, how can, you know, we help people in this other area of their life where they're paying a lot of money for, right?
Yeah.
And I think too of people, what was I going to say? With the healthcare. Anyways, I lost my train of thought, but I was going to say it had something to do with Doug Ford, but I just really
I was
hate
going to
Doug
say
Ford,
definitely
so.
Doug Ford related.
Oh no, it was going to be the rent with the housing, right? Like everybody's like, oh, like we got to get a conservative government and to fix the housing, and I'm like, we got freaking dumb fathead Ford over here. Sorry, that's just I hate him.
Folks,
he got rid of.
He's gonna
he got
win
rid
again.
Of, he got rid of rent control. Like if you want to blame somebody for the fact that like we're struggling to move out and rent prices are out of control, blame that loser, because that's why rent's so high in Ontario right now, because he said, screw rent control. I'm going to help out my landlord buddies.
Well, and the problem is the whole world is going through a changing moment. So
Yeah.
things that are happening in Ontario
It's
are
universal.
Yeah.
It's not just us. We're not, you know, and that's where, again, I come back to this idea of it's not individual people, it's governments, it's people as whole, it's policy as whole. But even if you don't like the government in power right now, I'm not super convinced that the opposite party is really going to do any better.
Yeah, I agree.
You know,
Especially in this country.
And you bring up Doug Ford, like Bonnie Crombie and Marit Stiles are going to have a real hard time beating him.
I know.
They just are. You know,
I know.
He has enough support right now that it's going to take a star candidate. And I shouldn't get too political because I'm supposed to be a journalist, but I just don't know if Marit or Bonnie has the star power to create a movement.
Yeah.
And that's what they need.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, listen, that last election, you remember what that was like. 2022, I'm at Ford campaign headquarters, and it was like early.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody knew. It was a landslide. So either, and turnout sucked. But that's because, like, nobody saw...
wanted an alternative.
Yeah, they didn't like the Liberals. They didn't like the NDP. So it was kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest elections in my 10-year voting history. I was like, who?
Yeah.
Who do you vote
I was like,
for?
I can't stand this guy, and I hate the policies that him and his team are implementing. I can't stand a lot of his MPs. Like, but I'm like, but who am I voting for alternatively?
I feel like at least what the Liberals, NDP, who else, what they're kind of lacking
Green
is in
Party.
a candidate is someone who's relatable.
Yeah.
They don't have somebody who's going to come out and just be like, fuck this. And the party doesn't want someone who's going to come out and say, fuck this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But like the people want someone to come out and be like, change that. We don't fucking want that. We're mad about that. Like, we want to see change.
I agree.
And the Liberals, for whatever reason, can't fucking seem to wrap their head around
don't
that.
I think
No.
the hatred that got thrown at Kathleen Wynne, they still haven't recovered
bounced
from.
back. I agree so much. Yeah.
And the crazy thing about Kathleen Wynne is that it was one thing. It was the hydro, and that just did her in. She arguably was one of the better premiers that we've had in this province. She didn't go crazy with the budget as everybody was expecting her to do. It was just the hydro. It did her in, and people were so mad about that. I really still don't think the Ontario Party, Liberal Party, has recovered from that.
I mean, I'm still mad about that. I mean, that was an outrageous thing. And I mean, her connection to McGuinty, you know, that didn't help her either. Again, it feels like people want change.
Yeah.
And so, you know, to bring it back to Trump, for whatever reason, Trump was able to align his flag with change. Kamala did not. Kamala was Biden 2.0.
Yeah, people are
More
tired.
of the same.
They
People
want
are tired.
change.
I think it's the same here in Canada. People want change. I don't even know if it's that people really like Poilievre. Again, I think it's
From what
more,
I hear, no. At least from true conservatives, nobody, people who actually pay attention to politics and like are like true conservatives, not like the fuck Trudeau's.
yes.
People, they don't really like Poilievre. It's just
Yeah.
like, well, That's our option right now.
I was saying that in Canada, we are a little bit more than the US. Like, we are a little bit more policy focused, and we do look more at like concrete policy than just like radical shouting like Trump was doing. And I think part of Poilievre's issue, for what you're saying, for true conservatives and not that fuck Trudeau sect, is he doesn't really have any policy ideas.
It's axe the tax, build the houses.
But how?
But
exactly.
how?
It's simplistic campaign phrases. We're going to do this. Sean Cowan, CHCH, one of our part-time reporters, he interviewed Poilievre yesterday.
Oh, no way.
And
PP.
yeah, PP.
His initials.
Little PP. He didn't really answer Sean's questions. He just brought everything back to
It's always
we're gonna axe the
Trudeau.
tax. It's all Trudeau's fault. After 9 years of corrupt liberal government, we're gonna make things better. But you're right. There's not a lot of policy. There's not a lot of how are we going. Sean asked a pretty simple question. What do you think is an affordable house? And all he could say is, well, when I was back in my day, type stuff. And he was talking about homes being about $400,000.
And then Trudeau came.
But that's, again, we come back to the idea of there's larger world forces like the pandemic, inflation, these things that are happening, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza. These things are happening. They impact all of us. And it's not necessarily the government in power's fault.
Yeah.
Listen.
Or there's not always a solution.
It's not black and white like people think it is. It's politics is very gray, in my opinion.
I agree. Because the world is gray, right? People who come through life and say, oh, it's black and white, right and wrong, yes and no. That's not life. No. Life is shades of gray. So, of course, our politics is shades of gray. Of course, our governments are shades of gray. But, there is a tendency to want to see things simply. It wants to be simple. Like, my life sucks, so if I vote for Poilievre, life will be better.
Yeah.
My life sucks, so if Trump's in office, it's going to be better.
Well, on that note, and to kind of like wrap things up, like, how we're not Americans, but like, how are you guys feeling about that? And like, how have you kind of seen people reacting to the results? Like, how do the results feel? And what's kind of like the mood around this thing?
The vibes are low.
The vibes are low. That's the quote.
The vibes are low.
What did your cousin Nick say when we went on the hike?
Oh, yeah. What did he say? Oh, the morale is low.
Morale
is low. That's how I feel about it. It's not like totally surprising. Maybe you could kind of chalk it up to people simply not wanting to vote for a woman, which is sad in 2024. But morale is low. It kind of is what it is at this point. That's where I'm at.
And I mean, I agree with you, but then I would also say morale is low amongst one side. Morale is very high amongst another side, right?
Yeah.
I think there's that duality of mood right now, whereas it depends on where you fall on the political spectrum and how you view the world. So I think it's a real like, strange time.
Yeah, like the middle class, the middle ground, it's kind of just eradicated. Like it's either you're way on the spectrum on one side or way on the other. It's like there's no kind of, people just can't have like calm discourse anymore.
Yeah. And I do hope, though, that we can all take a breath and that calmer heads do prevail. Because I think even though he's in office, I want to believe that good things will still happen in the world, period.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live in a world where it's like, well, Trump's president, so automatically the world's shit.
Yeah.
I don't want to live in that world.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to remain optimistic. My big concern is how this impacts Canada. I love America, but I'm not an American. I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned about people losing jobs. I'm concerned about people not being able to afford products that they used to be able to afford because of stupid protectionist policies. You talk to any economist, protectionism doesn't work. It's a global economy. It's 2024. So that's where my mood lies. I'm worried about our fellow Canadians.
Yeah. My mood, I'm worried about Canada less. Obviously, I'm worried about Canada economically, but I'm worried about Canada from a moral standpoint. I will say my reaction to him winning, I'm sad because my motto is always I don't know how I should explain to you that you should care about other people.
Sure.
And hearing him embolden so many people to double down on their hate for minorities, double down on their hate for women, double down on their hate for the LGBTQ community, it shatters my heart. It makes me so upset, and I hear it here too, because he has given a voice to that, and it really, really...
It's disheartening.
Yeah, it makes me sad that we have these people who are reverting back to those old, archaic thoughts, and that we're teaching a new generation to continue those thoughts when we've worked so hard around the world to try and make gains. And I just feel, from a moral perspective, him getting the go-ahead as a criminal, a bigot, a rapist, to be the leader of what the world says is the free world, that is sad to me. And that's just how I really felt on Wednesday. I was very sad that I was like, wow, I'm going to have to teach my sister's kids again to, like, don't think like this. Again, when I thought we moved past all of that.
But maybe we weren't that far past, because it is interesting how much of the youth
how easy it was.
Trump got.
Yeah.
He got so many young people.
But that's because
that young MAGA movement.
But that's because the people who get platformed, which is why everybody tries to, and it's like, oh, cancel culture. It's like, no, because you have these people who are conspiracy theorists and who are misogynists and bigots with a microphone like we have right now. And that's who the kids want to listen to.
Yeah, well, bro culture certainly played a part in this. The Joe Rogan podcast.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, we didn't even bring up Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
but speaking of podcasts, that probably got him more votes than many of the other things he did in his campaign.
But again, it's that lack of critical thinking, because a lot of people who listen to Joe Rogan will say, Joe Rogan's not political. He doesn't take political stance. I'm like, I barely listen to the podcast, and I know he takes a political stance.
Yeah.
What are you guys talking about? So I just hope, it seems big right now, I think, because of Trump winning and just how vocal his supporters have been online. I'm just hoping it seems bigger than it actually is.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So anyways,
Good final thought.
the U.S. election, polarizing, crazy, shocking, just an overall global event, really. So thank you, Matt, for joining us on the
No problem.
podcast.
Thanks for
Thank
having me.
you.
Appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for sharing all your smart knowledge and stuff you've learned over the last month covering this with us. And yeah, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. And be sure to subscribe to us anywhere you can listen to your favorite podcast, the Good Vibes Only podcast. You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Good Vibes Only Pods, and on X at Pod Good Vibes. So thanks for listening.
Yay. I can't smile because my gum grabbed, but yay. Cut.
Woo!
Awesome.
Yay, we did it.
Like that was a good one.
It sounded good.
I'm like listening to you talk. I'm like, oh my God, so smart.
I knew that would be good.